But let me just introduce now our special guest. Kapil Sibal is here, senior Congress leader, former union minister, and great to have you, as always, Kapil Sibal. Well, firstly, I suppose congratulations are in order, because one could quibble over the fine print, but effectively, this is a fairly significant sign of a Congress revival, if not an outright victory. Yeah. But that's pretty significant. Would you still say that you were hoping for a more emphatic result, certainly in Rajasthan?
You must understand that in Rajasthan, for example, the victory was huge. If you look at the past election, I mean, they had 165.
And you were only at 21.
We are 21. So you can imagine the kind of gap that we had to fill. So to that extent, I think it's a great result.
Right, because you've actually jumped something like 80 seats.
From 21 to 2, they lost about 90 seats. And
right.
We've jumped from 21 to 100. I mean, I think that itself is a story.
And would you use the same logic in Madhya Pradesh as well?
Same
because
thing,
again, you were at about 60 and they were,
exactly.
close to another 160.
Exactly, the same thing. But of course, Madhya Pradesh, you could have done a little better. But Rajasthan, I think, is a good result. Madhya Pradesh, we'll yet to see.
Okay. But at the end of the day, Kapil Sibal, if you take Madhya Pradesh, you had a 3-term chief minister there. And some would say that despite the fact that you had a buffer, it should have been a state for the taking. There was farmer anger, there was unemployment, there was Dalit anger, and you're still in a close fight.
Well,
is there something about the way the Congress fights elections that you'd still say?
Well, I don't think so. See, there are lots of things going for the BJP. I mean, you must understand that. Okay. In terms of money power, I don't think anybody can match them, right? And they use it left, right, and center. In terms of organization capacities, Amit Shah's booth organization is much better. There's no doubt about it.
You concede that?
You can, yeah, it's true. I mean, why should we not concede?
No, I agree.
Number 3, they have a leader, a sitting chief minister, right, who's given out huge doles to people, both in Chhattisgarh as well as in Madhya Pradesh, as well as in Rajasthan. Rajasthan a little less, right? Then all kinds of announcements from the center, right? So, and then of course, the epitome of leadership, as the BJP would say it, Modi.
So these are the 5 or 6 M's that Yogendra calls: money, Modi, machinery, and also media.
And media, of course. And I didn't want to say that, but now that you mentioned it, I might as well endorse that.
Well, it's true.
So the point is, with all this going, I think it's a good result for the Congress party. What does it mean for us? It means we need to improve our organization, right? We can't match them on the money, because I don't think that's possible.
Right.
We hope that the media will be a little more circumspect, right, which has not been so far. We do hope that that whoever now becomes the chief minister actually starts dealing with issues. See, winning an election is just the first step.
Sure.
The real issues are issues of the people. Right. So when you talked about the Hindi heartland, I think what's really happened in this election, that the people think that the BJP has no heart.
Right.
And land is the real problem for the BJP, because the farmers are really upset with
Okay,
them.
that's an interesting play on words.
And that's throughout the Hindi heartland.
Okay, so help me look a little bit ahead at 2019 and at some of the lessons from these elections. One of the lessons which we've been speaking about all day is whether there is a signal here to the Congress about being able to handle its alliances better. Because one argument is, had you stitched up that BSP alliance, you would have been in a much more comfortable position. I think in hindsight, mistake?
No, I think that you really don't. You have to understand the nature of politics before you ask that question.
Okay.
You had the same problem in Chhattisgarh. You said the same thing. The media has been the same thing to us in Chhattisgarh, right?
Yes. Why didn't
we didn't have an alliance, and see what we've got: 64 seats. That's a massive victory.
Yes.
Right. What happens is that when you enter into alliances here, where actually the fight is between the BJP and the Congress party, the problem is, if you start conceding space, next time there is no going back. So you have to look at the national perspective. You have to look at your own future. At the same time, you have to ally with parties where you feel that you cannot negotiate with them. But therefore, the question is that we have to take a calibrated decision. We took a decision that, yes, we're likely to win, right? If we concede too much space, then next time around, like it's the situation in Uttar Pradesh is because Narsim Rao ji entered into a deal with the BSP and see where we are. So I think that we must understand the nature of alliances and the impact of those alliances in future elections.
But Mr. Sibal, you didn't have that hesitation in Telangana. You got into a partnership with the Telugu
Desam. In Telangana, where were we in any case? What was our position in Telangana? We were nowhere. Right? We don't have that kind of maneuverability in Uttar Pradesh even. Well, let's be clear on that. We're nowhere in Uttar Pradesh at the moment. Right? So therefore, the next election is going to be determined by what's going to happen in Uttar Pradesh and what's going to happen in Bihar.
Okay.
With the victory in the Hindi heartland now, the tide will turn.
So help me here with looking ahead to 2019. Would you say that this is an indication that the tide is turning? Because some would say, you would turn around and argue that this is evidence of the fact that the Modi luster is fading. He's not the same campaigner as he was. He doesn't have the same appeal as he was. But some could turn around and say that he actually held back in this election. He didn't campaign with that same intensity that he might do in 2019.
I tell you, there's a unique nature of this particular election, which perhaps has not been debated so far.
Okay.
See, this is the first time when decisions at the national level by the BJP have impacted the local election. I tell you why. Take demonetization. It was a decision at the national level, but it affects everybody in India. Right? So it's adversely affected all the local elections because people have been harmed by that decision. Right? At every strata of society, whether it's the farmers or it's the trading classes or it's the medium sector and the self-help groups, everybody has been deeply impacted. That's number one. Number two is the GST. Again, a decision at the national level which has affected local elections because it affected everybody in India. So this is really a negative as you go into 2019.
Okay.
Because this impacts everybody in India and the impact is being felt. And there is no way that the BJP can turn it around.
But you didn't answer my question on Narendra Modi. Are you saying that these sorts of decisions override the fact that he still is a popular, powerful, charismatic campaigner?
Doesn't matter if he's popular. If I have to buy petrol at 80 rupees, Narendra Modi's popularity is irrelevant. If a scooter wala goes and buys his petrol at 80 rupees or 75 rupees, knowing that the price of crude has come down, it pinches him. If a farmer has to sell onions at 50 paisa or 1 rupee 50 paisa, when he otherwise sold it at 21 rupees, he's not going to look at Narendra Modi's great oratorical skills. He's worried about his everyday life. And that's what's happened in India. People have turned against this government. And it really doesn't matter whether Narendra Modi is a great orator or not. It really doesn't matter.
Narendra Modi is a great orator or not, it doesn't matter. What about whether it matters that the opposition has a leadership, a single face, and is that, and do you think, because we've not spoken about Rahul Gandhi at all, do you think that these elections, somewhere along the line, the outcome is a sign that Rahul Gandhi is now finally being able to deliver results for the Congress? How much credit would you give him versus to your state leadership, because you've had a very strong state leadership as well?
Let's separate these two issues. Number one, we didn't have a chief minister's face.
In any of these?
That's in any of these. Yes. Even in Chhattisgarh, we won. It's a handsome victory. Right. Rajasthan is a handsome victory, I think. Madhya Pradesh is yet to be seen. Right. So that's one aspect of it. So therefore, it doesn't necessarily require an alternative leader to win an election. That's number one. Number two, I think you must give credit to Rahul Gandhi because he's worked tirelessly. He's worked tirelessly throughout this election process. And I think that he is connected, especially with the marginalized, with the tribals, with the poorer people, with the farmers. So I think we must give him credit for that. But you can't sort of say that an election is won or lost because of one individual.
Right.
Election is won or lost on a complex of factors. And Rahul Gandhi's contribution in that is significant.
Right. Now, when we look at the question of leadership at the state level, because you have a peculiar situation where you have, what you would consider able leaders, two able leaders in each of these states who are jostling for power. Let's just look at Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan for a second, because you have a very clear generational divide there, unlike Chhattisgarh. I won't get into asking you who should be or who's going to be, because obviously, none of us know that at this stage.
Right.
But broadly, would you say that is the idea, or do you think the idea should be to consider some kind of generational shift, to give, the younger leadership a chance?
As I said, I mean, I'm sure that the party will discuss these issues. I'm no one to give an opinion or give an opinion on that. Several factors have to be taken into account.
Sure.
So I would say that instead of can enable, it's can enable. So let's see who can and who is able.
Okay, that's a very clever, lawyerly way of ducking the question. But I'm just asking.
I'm not ducking the question. I cannot answer it because I cannot possibly decide on these issues.
So I didn't pin you down to specifics. I'm just asking broadly that do you think generally it's a good idea to see?
I think we need a generational change in Modi ji's government. Maybe you should have Yogi Adityanath become the next possible Prime Minister in India.
But what about in the Congress party?
Therefore, I'm saying to you that all these are very complex issues.
Okay.
I mean, generation change is certainly a factor that should be considered. Experience is another factor that should be considered. Who the party is supporting, who the legislators are supporting is another factor that is to be considered. How to deal with problems of tomorrow is another factor that is to be considered.
Okay.
But I don't think that you can take decisions like that in this fashion.
Okay, I've tried. You've pushed back. Fair enough. Last question before I let you go. There's been talk for some time now that secular politics, not secularism, but secular politics of the kind that it has been conventionally practiced, which is making overt gestures towards minorities, is dead, is dying or is dead. Would you say that with these elections, it further signals the demise of that sort of politics, especially as you see the way that the Congress is now positioning itself in election after election?
I think it will be a very sad day for this country if we destroy secular politics. I think that's the only way country can survive.
But isn't that happening?
It's not happening. I think that you're looking at symbolism and gestures to believe that secularism is dead. I think secularism is alive and kicking, and we must embrace it, because that's the only way the country will be united. That's the only way we can actually resolve issues of the people. It's time to forget about dividing people. Winning elections is the first step. Taking care of people is what the ultimate objective has to be.
Those are very worthy words, and those are very worthy intentions. But if you look at the Congress in the recent past, you've invisibilized Muslims in a way that you rarely have.
Not true.
Where do you see?
Not true. I don't think we've. I don't think so. We've talked about them. We've talked about an inclusive society. We've talked about that BJP, Modi ji himself, the leaders that have been making speeches are dividing India. We've talked about that. We've been publicly, Rahul Gandhi has been opposing that. So I don't think that that's true. You take some symbolic gestures of somebody going here to there and say suddenly, well, I'm a Hindu. One second, I am a Hindu. I go to a temple. Nobody talks about me, and I'm not. This is not soft Hindutvism. This is not soft Hindutva.
Okay, you go in your personal time and your personal space. You don't make it part of your. It's not part of an election campaign in the way that
I do. You are mistaken. In 1996, the first thing that I did before I started the election, I went to the temple. Then I went to the Gurdwara.
Okay.
And every time I fought an election, I've started by going to the temple. But you don't notice me.
Oh no! To say we come on. I mean, that's unfair. This is the subject of a longer debate for which we don't have time. But I just want to ask you before we let you go that. Are you confident that even if you fall short by a couple of numbers in Madhya Pradesh, particularly, that you will get support from other parties, the BSP, for instance? Any indications at all?
Well,
that they may be amenable.
I personally think that any party which has a couple of seats will be looking at 2019. And then taking a position as to whether it is to ally with us or not.
Okay.
And I think that's really crucial. That's what will determine who is going to form the government.
Is there a yes or a no about Mayawati?
I told you. It is whoever is looking at 2019 and wants to position that party in 2019 will take a decision consistent with that objective.
But you are confident that you are going to form the government in Madhya Pradesh as we speak?
As confident as I can be.
Okay. All right. Kapil Sibal, thank you very much indeed for spending so much time with us. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.